Hello, everybody. Happy Mother's Day again. We celebrated Mother's Day today. My daughter Katie made breakfast, so we had a little breakfast without Kristen, minus Kristen, but we sent her a little picture. And, it was nice. She's like went all out, like crepes and really good. And I started putting fruit in this bowl, and she's like, can you put it in a nicer bowl? I'm like, oh, okay. So, we're continuing our I Am series. These are the I Am statements, 7 I Am statements that Jesus made in the Gospel of John. And we've covered like 3 or 4 now? I don't know, something like that. And last week, we've covered 5. Oh, okay. Last week, David covered I Am the Gate and talked a little bit about my topic, I Am the Good Shepherd. So I won't be preaching today. We're just going to play games, okay? Just kidding. You guys look a little too excited, though, I would have to say. No, but it's almost impossible to talk about I Am the Gate without talking about I Am the Good Shepherd, because it's almost in the same breath, almost in the same paragraph that Jesus makes those 2 I Am statements. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through some of the same info that we covered last week, that David covered, in order to shed light on this I Am statement. So we're going to establish the immediate context of what led Jesus to say these 2 I Am statements, and in particular, I am the Good Shepherd. Anybody remember who was paying attention, what event took place right before these I Am statements? Raise your hand. Yes, our new elder. Yes, healing of the blind man. The only person paying attention last week. No, I'm just kidding. So Jesus uses this very unusual method of healing. He spits on the ground and he creates a little bit of mud and he rubs it on this blind man's eyes. And he tells him to go wash at the pool of Siloam. So he goes there and he's like, oh, whatever, and he goes and he washes at the pool, and suddenly, lo and behold, he can see. And, we talk a little bit about that unusual, like a lot of preachers have talked about that healing method, and then I remember as a kid, I heard some Korean pastor really go to town about the mud and all this, and I'm like, I don't really care about that. I just want to focus on the aftermath, okay? Is that all right with you guys? I don't really care about what mud he used, all that stuff. I'm going to focus on what happened after. And this man, as he washes his eyes and the mud off, he was born blind, by the way. He wasn't just someone who lost his eyesight. He was born blind. And all of a sudden, he could see the world around him for the first time. Can you just use your imagination to see what that would be like, to think what that would be like? Can you imagine his reaction, his excitement, his disbelief? What? I can't believe this actually is happening. And he must have caused such a stir as he started running around, screaming, yelling, laughing, crying, hysterical, and letting everyone know around him that he is able to see. I don't think anyone within the next few blocks would have not noticed the buzz that was starting to grow, right? But after just a few short minutes of exhilarating celebration, experiencing the joy of the greatest thing that has ever happened in his life, his eyes that he uses for the very first time begins to see the cruel, dark world around him. He didn't get to slowly take in the vivid colors of God's beautiful creation, trees and flowers, and touching things, maybe even loved ones' faces. Oh, you're my sister, you're my mom, you're my dad, like that beautiful revelations unfolding. No, he didn't get to do that. Instead, he saw haughty, heartless expressions on people's faces, and they began to aggressively question him. Like, hey, and as he's telling everyone who he is, they're like, that's not him, impossible. He just looks like the guy. He just looks like the blind guy. It's not him. And then he's like, no, I'm telling you, it's me. And they're like, it's not him. It's not him. He's like, this guy gets no respect. And even though he insists, they don't believe him. Finally, some people gather around. They're like, well, how did you get to see if you're the blind guy? And he said, the man, Jesus. Can you take a little bit of the high end off? It's very piercing right now. Check. 1, 2. Check, check, check. Still a little hissy. Can you take the hiss? Check, check, check. Is it possible to even a little more? Check. 1, 2. Check, check, check. Is that better, guys? A little less? Okay. I just don't want to you guys to death up here. Okay. Thanks to Brian. Brian does a great job up there. Everybody give him a big hand. Our faithful Brian. So, as soon as he mentions Jesus, there's people in the crowd that are like, oh, it's that guy the Pharisees talked about. We think he's demon-possessed. Some of them didn't believe Jesus was from God. And so they take this blind man to the Pharisees to see what they would do. Talk about not having a voice or not even being heard whatsoever. This poor blind guy who was healed. So now he can't even celebrate. The Pharisees start sitting him down and questioning him. So what happened? What happened? You know? And he says, well, I got healed. This man put mud on my eyes, told me to wash in Siloam, pool of Siloam, and now I can see. And they're like, okay. So, and then they start talking amongst themselves. They're not even like really paying attention to him, except just trying to extract some information. And then they're like, so again, what happened? And they keep questioning him again and again. It's like the same thing going on again and again. And he's like, I'm telling you, this is what happened. And they said, okay, so who did this? And he said, the man called Jesus. And they said, Jesus, it can't be. That guy doesn't even obey the Sabbath. And in their eyes, Sabbath meant following all these extra layers of rules and regulations that rabbis wrote. It wasn't even in the Bible. It wasn't in the scriptures at all. They created all these extra curricular rules, and they had to abide by it strictly. But it wasn't something that God created. These are just from teachers, people. And so they accused Jesus of not obeying the Sabbath. And so they're like, he can't be of God, because he's not religious like us. And so they are too narrow-minded. They cannot believe that Jesus is from God. They cannot believe that Jesus could possibly be the Messiah because he didn't fit into their understanding of things. And they even acknowledge his healing. They're like, okay, so he's the one that healed your eyes, so what do you think of him? To the man who was healed. And he's like, he's a prophet. And they're like, duh, no way that guy's a prophet. And then they begin to go crazy again. And finally, they start to question his parents. They find his parents. And his parents are like, well, we don't know. Maybe ask him, he's of age. I mean, this is the greatest day of their child's life. And they completely failed to back him up because they were so afraid to be kicked out of the synagogue, to be kicked out of the community. So the Pharisees continually question this man, this poor guy, again. Like, they treat him like a child. They don't even treat him like a fellow human. They just treat him more like a pawn, a chess piece in their plot to take down Jesus, right? And so condescending, so arrogant in the way they speak to this man. And I love this guy. We don't even know his name. And his response is so perfect. He's like so exasperated. He's like, okay, whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind and now I see. It's like, can we focus on the main thing here, guys? Can't we just celebrate the amazing thing that God has done for me? And then they ask him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? And now he's getting really exasperated. He actually gets sarcastic. He's like, I have told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too? And then they hurled insults at him and said, you are this fellow's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from. And then the man goes like this, now, that is remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly person who does as well. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. And then this just sets off the Pharisees, and they reply, you were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And they threw him out. This is how the shepherds of Israel treated this man. So Jesus hears about this guy getting kicked out of the synagogue. So he goes and seeks him out, and he finds him. And he asks him, do you believe in the Son of Man? And at that point, I think everyone knew what he meant by Son of Man. He's referring to him, the Messiah. And he goes, tell me who he is so I can believe in him. And he goes, I am he. And there were Pharisees around when he said this, right? And so this guy just worships Jesus. He actually worshiped Jesus. He gave praise to him like he's God, right? And Jesus didn't go, whoa, hey, stop me. I'm just a man. He didn't do that. He just received the worship because he is the Son of God, right? And then these Pharisees who were disapproving were standing there, arms crossed maybe, just staring at Jesus and just, And Jesus mentioned something about spiritual blindness. And then they're like, they knew he was talking about them. So they go, oh, are you saying we're blind? They're just incredulous. And he says, if you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains. And it's in this context that Jesus goes into his I am statements. And we're just going to read it together. John chapter 10, I forgot to turn off my volume. I got a cacao message, sorry. Turn that off. All right, there we go. All right, so you guys ready? Okay, let's all read this together. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away. Are you guys not reading? Different translation? Oh, okay. So I'll just read it. How's that? Like, you guys got really quiet. Okay, so when the wolf attacks and the flock and scatters it, the man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this sheep pen. He's talking about Gentiles, us, one day. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice. And there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down on my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up. This command I received from my Father. So he is saying all of this to contrast what the shepherds of Israel were doing. The Pharisees, the religious leaders. And in some ways he's echoing the prophecy from Ezekiel chapter 34. And I'll read this as well. I want you to listen to this. This is the prophet Ezekiel giving a prophetic word to the religious leaders of Israel. Then this message came to me from the Lord. Son of man, prophesy against the shepherds, the leaders of Israel. Give them this message from the sovereign Lord. What sorrow awaits you, shepherds who feed yourselves instead of your flocks? Shouldn't shepherds feed their sheep? You drink the milk, wear the wool, and butcher the best animals, but you let your flock starve. You have not taken care of the weak. You have not tended the sick or bound up the injured. You have not gone looking for those who have wandered away and are lost. Instead, you have ruled them with the harshness and cruelty. So my sheep have been scattered without a shepherd, and they are easy prey for any wild animal. They have wandered through all the mountains and all the hills across the face of the earth, yet no one has gone to search for them. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. As surely as I live, says the sovereign Lord, you abandoned my flock and left them to be attacked by every wild animal. And though you were my shepherds, you didn't search for my sheep when they were lost. You took care of yourselves and left the sheep to starve. Therefore, you shepherds, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says. I now consider these shepherds my enemies, and I will hold them responsible for what has happened to my flock. I will take away their right to feed the flock, and I will stop them from feeding themselves. I will rescue my flock from their mouths. The sheep will no longer be their prey. Interesting how he says, I will rescue my sheep from your mouths, basically calling them wolves, right? For this is what the sovereign Lord says, I myself will search and find my sheep. I will be like a shepherd looking for his scattered flock. I will find my sheep and rescue them from all the places where they were scattered on that dark and cloudy day. I will bring them back home to their own land of Israel, from among the peoples and nations. I will feed them on the mountains of Israel and by the rivers and in all the places where people live. Yes, I will give them good pasture land on the high hills of Israel. There they will lie down in pleasant places and feed in the lush pastures of the hills. I myself will tend my sheep and give them a place to lie down in peace, says the sovereign Lord. I will search for my lost ones who strayed away, and I will bring them safely home again. I will bandage the injured and strengthen the weak. So I want you to just look at the difference between the religious leader shepherds and Jesus, the good shepherd. So the religious leaders used intimidation, they used threats, they did not love the sheep or even bother to know that blind man. They just looked right through him. They were not trustworthy, they were not safe people, and they were not willing to do anything for the sheep. They didn't even give him a congratulations. They couldn't celebrate at all. And then what did they do? They kicked him out, this sheep, right? So they did everything opposite. What did Jesus, the good shepherd, do? He cares for his sheep. He's fully invested in his sheep, and he knows his sheep. He is trustworthy and safe. He went to seek out and find this man, and he says that he lays down his life for his sheep. So when Jesus called himself the Good Shepherd, everyone listening knew exactly what he was talking about because they were all very familiar with shepherding. Much like how we're familiar with servers at restaurants or flight attendants. You know, if Jesus referred to these jobs at all, we'd get it. If he said, I am the good flight attendant, I make sure your seatbelts are on and that your seat is in an upright position, we would totally get what he's talking about. Or I am the good server. I make sure to check on you at least 4 times throughout your meal, and your water is constantly full. I don't know, right? But if he made any kind of like spiritual analogies or anything, we would get it. Oh, that's what he's saying, right? But since we don't live in a society where we see what shepherding entails, let me share with you some insight into this profession. In fact, it's the second oldest profession next to, anybody know? Take a guess. Farming, yes. It's not prostitution. I know some of you might have been thinking that, because you hear that it's the oldest profession, right? It is not the oldest profession. And like David said last week, sheep are one of, if not the earliest domesticated animals in human history. From the beginning of human history, they were already being domesticated. Anyone know who the very first shepherd was in the Bible? Abel, thank you. Get hands raised, please, next time. No, I'm just kidding. All right, I want to just test your biblical literacy here. All right, can you name any other shepherds you knew that you read about in the Bible, in the Old Testament? David, yes. Anyone else? Jacob, yes. A couple more. Rack your brain. Abraham, yes. Although he was pretty wealthy, he probably had others do it for him. And obviously his son Isaac would have continued that. Moses, yes. Thank you, Elder Brian. And I'm going to ask you one tough one. There was a prophet that was a shepherd. He was known as the prophet who was a shepherd. All right. Close. Rhymes with famous. Amos. Famous Amos. Yeah. All right. Good job, guys. Give yourselves a big pat on the back. So shepherding was and is quite a dangerous job. Okay. They're exposed to the elements. So, especially in the climate where Israel was, they dealt with the harsh sun beating down on them. right? Sometimes they would have to really be careful of dehydrating or getting heat stroke and stuff, right? Also, sometimes it was bitterly cold and windy. The terrain could be very rough. Side hill, like in golf we call it a side hill lie if the ball is on a hill, and then we have to face it, and it's like hitting a baseball almost, right? They had to walk on sides of hills, rocks, loose pebbles everywhere, and they're slipping, and they don't have Nikes back then. They're sliding around in like loose sandals and stuff, right? Also, they had to deal with predators, wild animals. And in David's day, there were like lions and bears. He makes a reference when he's talking to Saul. Saul's like, "Yeah, I can't send you out there. You're just a little puny kid." And he's like, "Trust me, king. I have dealt with lions. I have faced bears. When they snatched one of my lambs, I took a club and beat it in the head." And this king's like, "What?" So, but I don't think he would have been that surprised, because shepherds were known to be able to protect their sheep. Not only that, they had a sling, and obviously David demonstrated what a sling can do. It's a crazy weapon, like it can send rocks at speeds of up to 250 kilometers an hour, almost, just under, maybe 240, okay? And it can even be incredibly accurate from about 200 yards away. That's 2 football field lengths. And it was so powerful that if they used the right rock, it was about the same impact of a 45. They could do some serious damage. I got a video I want you to see real quick of some demonstrations of what a sling looks like. Look at this guy. Look at that great elbow in the slot. Boom, booyah. Oh my goodness.
Deadly countermeasure. The sling. Rounded clay balls and stones as projectiles for the sling. These traveled at more than 240 kilometers per hour. Their consistent size and weight made them accurate.
You get the picture, right? So the damage done by these were very massive, So these guys were, pretty equipped, these shepherds. They weren't just like skinny little kids just walking around, they were ready, man. They were ready to, but it was still dangerous. They had to face these predators. And shepherding was also quite a boring, lonely job. Imagine no one to talk to. You just hear bah all day, right? But in this solitude, there's no electronic gadgets to help pass the time, nothing but time to think and contemplate about life. David must have cried out to God and realized so many insights of how God is the true shepherd that he wrote Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd." And this can only come from true solitude. St. Patrick, anybody know who St. Patrick was besides celebrating St. Patrick's Day, wearing green? Well, St. Patrick was actually French. He was from the country at the time called Gaul. And he was only 16 when Irish raiders came in and just took him and sold him as a slave in Ireland. That's how he became eventually a missionary to Ireland, because he went back. He was a slave for 6 years, and what was his job? He was a shepherd. And while shepherding for 6 years, he said he cried out to God for freedom every day. And he was so lonely and so heartbroken that he was like in this predicament that he said he must have lifted up 1,000 prayers a day in tears, crying out. And eventually it became this beautiful relationship he found with God. And he would start to just give praise more than he would about like complaining and trying to get free. He would start to just like get closer to God. And when he finally got freedom, he actually went back and became a missionary to the Irish. You should read up on him. He was an incredible man. All right. So a good shepherd is also so attentive to his sheep that after a while, they could tell the difference between each sheep. Watching sheep so carefully, shepherds start to notice the uniqueness and the distinctions between each of them. Bad, oh yeah, it's still different, Well, that one's got a spot behind his left ear, and that one's got a little thing on his ankle, or, like they could tell all these differences. And what did the shepherd do? They were basically responsible for tending, making sure that the sheep are fed, nourished. And so they make sure that they are eating, in the right places, guiding them to water, and the right pastures, in and out from the enclosings. That you saw the enclosures that David showed, those rock walls that they created. They would have to lead them in and out of those things. They would also have to mend, give proper care to injured sheep. They were also responsible for gathering, finding, and bringing back sheep that have wandered off, herding them back, and finally protecting them from predators. And as with many other jobs, there were good shepherds and there were bad, negligent shepherds. Really good shepherds were probably tough to find. Sheep cost money. And every time a sheep was lost to malnourishment, injury, or to predators, it cost the owners lots of money. So to minimize the loss and damage, it required having excellent shepherds. Excellent shepherds often put their own life on the line to protect the sheep against predators. So when Jesus called himself the Good Shepherd, people would think and know about these details about shepherding and also be able to understand the spiritual meanings of what a good shepherd did. All right? So we've established that Jesus is the Good Shepherd. But what I don't want to get lost in all of this is Jesus calling us sheep. Why would Jesus call us sheep? All right? Let me just describe sheep real quickly. Sheep have bad depth perception. They can see up to maybe about 20 feet. That's about it. But they have rectangular pupils. So it gives them the incredible peripheral vision. They can see about 320 to 340 degrees of peripheral vision. They just can't see the back of their heads. But everything else they can see, like this. All right? But they lack visual clarity. All right? So, there we go. Yeah. And then sheep are some of the dumbest animals in the world. They tend to react and do just what other sheep do. So if they're grazing too close to the edge of a cliff, this really happens. One sheep falls off, all the others will be like, oh, where'd he go? And they all fall off the cliff, right? It has been known that all the other sheep will have fallen off, and that's a lot of money right there, okay? And they just do so many dumb things. Just look at some of these videos of sheep here. I know God created them, but look at this guy right here. He's helping this poor little lamb, fell into a crevice, and he's like, finally free. Lets him out, and he's like, yay, I'm free! Oh no! Yeah. So it's pretty rough. And we say Jesus is calling us sheep. Interesting. I want you to see this video, this next video. Oh yeah. Look at it. They just happened to see a jogger run in France, and these sheep are like, oh, there's our leader. And they started to follow her. And she every time she stopped, they stop. And if she starts running, they start following. Yeah, that's sheep right there. All right. And yet, Jesus calls us sheep. So, are we really like sheep? Well, let me just take a look at one more video here. There's a video here I have. It's an experiment.
Set up a hidden camera experiment to see if this one would stand up at the sound of this tone. Simply because everyone else is. You might be thinking you've never
Maybe
heard
volume up.
Or would you? After just 3 beats, and without knowing why she's doing it, this woman is now conforming perfectly to the group. But what happens if we take the group away?
Elaine, please.
Okay, now she's alone. The crowd is gone, and nobody is watching her, except our hidden cameras. What do you think she'll do? She's now conforming to the rules of the group without them even being there.
It gets
Now,
better.
watch what happens when we introduce another outsider who doesn't know the rules.
Have a seat and they'll be out in just a couple minutes. Thanks so much.
Think she'll teach the new guy what to do? We kept the cameras rolling as more unsuspecting patients arrived. And slowly but surely, what began as a random rule for this woman has now become the social norm for everyone in this waiting room. Here to explain what's
Okay.
going on in their
Then we can
brains
have this-
is Jonah Berger of the
Thank you. It's, yeah, that's crazy, isn't it? Man, I mean, it's funny. But all kidding aside, we are more like sheep than we realize. We get lost easily. We lose our way. We need guidance. We tend to follow what the majority says a lot of times, kind of like that. We can't sustain ourselves spiritually. We need the Holy Spirit. We can't protect ourselves against Satan or the world without God's help. Jesus is saying, I am the good shepherd. I can help you with all those things. But it has to go beyond just acknowledging that Jesus is a good shepherd, you know? It's like, great, Jesus is a good shepherd. Wonderful. We have to let him shepherd us. Jesus said his sheep know him. His sheep know his voice. How we live our lives reflect how well we know him and how well we know his voice. Jesus doesn't say some of his sheep don't know his voice. Either you're his sheep or you're not his sheep. I want you to just listen to Psalm 23 that David wrote. He said, the Lord is my shepherd, I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessings. Surely goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. Amen? So letting Jesus shepherd you means, first, you are truly content and have a perspective of being truly taken care of. That's a sign that you are letting Jesus shepherd you. You find rest, contrary to restlessness or feeling weary or burned out. You find rest. Another sign that you are letting Jesus shepherd you is that you are experiencing the peace of Christ. Not anxiety, worry, or confusion, but the peace of Christ that transcends all understanding. Also, you are constantly being renewed in your strength. Not running on empty, not barely hanging on. You are being renewed constantly in your strength. Also, you let Jesus guide you in the right direction if you let him shepherd you. Decision-making, life choices, being guided by Jesus, not by the enticement of money, status, greed, jealousy, envy, selfishness, pride, or by fear and worry. And how do we know that we're being guided by Jesus? The decisions and choices you make bring honor to his name, according to David. All right? Another sign is this: you feel Jesus close to you, even in the darkest of times, and you're not afraid. Also, you are comforted by Jesus. Now, we have been learning as a church and growing in this area of learning how to embrace our grief, learning how to acknowledge our pain, right? We've been kind of talking a little bit about that. But if you are continually going through the pain and wallowing in the emotions for an extended period of time, you are not letting Jesus truly comfort you. You need to be comforted by Jesus. You need to let him comfort you. You see, comforted people exhibit visible evidence of being comforted. You ever go to a funeral and someone gets really comforted by someone hugging them and someone really meaningful in their lives, and they're like, oh, thank you. And they almost have hope in their face when they say thank you because they feel comforted. It's visible. You can tell. But if you are almost holding on to this pain or this grief too much to the point of like, it's like something that you almost value, then you are not letting Jesus comfort you. Am I making sense? There is a fine line. You can actually cross that line and get too lost and wallow in your pain sometimes. But Jesus, the Good Shepherd, wants to comfort you. And comforted people have hope. Comforted people have joy in their hearts. Even in the midst of sadness, they can actually have joy. All right? And people who let Jesus shepherd them truly feel the abundance of God in their lives. You know, like language like feasting, overflowing blessings are words that come out of their mouth regularly. And finally, you daily walk in God's goodness and experience his unfailing love as you dwell in his presence daily. That is a sign that you are letting Jesus shepherd you. So what do we do now? What do I do in response to this? There's no magic formula that I can offer. There's no 7 steps to being a good sheep, you know? There's nothing like that. But I can tell you 2 things. Number 1, create space for Jesus. Create space. That means time, place. You know, if you think somehow during the day you're gonna meet with Jesus, you're not gonna meet with Jesus. I've tried that, it never works. You have to create special time. Like, it's kind of like exercise. I'll throw it in there somewhere in the day. No, you're never gonna exercise. You're just gonna gain weight, all right? But if you go, I'm gonna get up at this time, or I'm gonna do this as my routine every day, you will exercise. It's kind of like that with Jesus, you know, and I just started doing push-ups and some exercise things like 3 days ago, and just trying to make it a routine, because like, I hurt my back recently, and I used to use this belt at the pierogi factory when I worked there, and I would literally like go like overlap it and then use the thing to tighten it, and I went to try it on, and it was like this. It wasn't even meeting the ends. It was like this, and I went, wake up call. So I was like, exercise. I started exercising again, all right? The reason why David was such a man of passion and conviction, and a man after God's own heart, as the Bible describes him as, someone who could write Psalm 23, is because he spent many days and even nights in the open fields, in the solitude of shepherding. He had lots of space to think and contemplate and cry out to God, just like St. Patrick did. Maybe we all should get some part-time jobs as shepherds somewhere, right? And finally, once you create that space, just talk to Jesus about everything that is on your heart, your concerns, worries, pains, what you're happy and excited about, your failures and weaknesses, your plans and choices that you must make. Remember, Jesus is a relational God who cares about you. He really does. You know, 1 Peter 5:7 says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Just throw it on him and let him carry your burdens. Jesus said we could all cast all of our cares on him because he cares for us. There is nothing we're going through that we cannot cast on the Lord. Amen. That's it. There's no formula, guys. We just have to do it. We know what we need to do. You know, you guys are not newbie sheep. You know, I know all of you guys here. We're not newbie sheep. We just need to do it, right? And we get confused and lost. You know, like we need to hear Jesus' voice, and we need to know his voice. Oh, you might say, well, I know his voice. But you know how many times I've seen kids grow through church, and then they go off to university, and then they hear all of the ideologies that are floating around in university, and then now they're pro-choice. They believe it's the woman's choice. They learn that early on in schools, right? And then they are completely for abortion. There's no like middle. They're like abortion, They can't think clearly about the things that God says anymore. It's just like whatever you hear, right? Like there's so much stuff like in the LGBT community. There's transgender stuff, and like if you watch some of these people pushing back with like logical arguments, it doesn't even hold up against these logical arguments. Like what if I said I am a mother? It's like they'll use that kind of that's ludicrous. But then why are you a woman? Because I can say that. It's almost like there's no logic to these things, right? Because they're listening to the voice not of God, but of the world, right? And so we have to understand that when we know His voice, we can actually think clearly. We can actually see things more clearly and go on a straighter path. We need to know His voice. And that only happens when we spend time with Him. That only happens when we create the space to listen to His voice. Amen? Amen.